guys, welcome back to Magic TV. My name's Craig. It's 9 o'clock, which means it's time for a Talk Magic, and I couldn't be more excited about the person I'm interviewing now. He is considered one of the top sleight of hand artists in the world today. He has literally been there, done that, had an amazing career, regular performer at the Magic Cafe, been on TV an absolute ton, an incredibly
Magic Cafe?
nice guy.
The
Magic Castle,
Cafe.
sorry.
Wow. I was like, wow, how do you even do that?
In my defense, it's 5 a.m. in the morning here, so I'm mixing words up. But the point is, he's absolutely amazing. And I am, of course, talking about Jon Armstrong. How you doing, John? Are you okay?
I'm great. Thank you very much. Other than the fact that I now need to work at the Magic Cafe, wherever that is, or unless you're talking about the amazing Geo series site that Steve Brooks runs. Either one. I'll do either one.
Yeah, I wouldn't put Steve Brooks past coming up some sort of virtual theatre. So, I'm sure that could happen.
Yeah, very possible.
Very, very possible. But seriously, thanks so much for doing this. I know how busy you are. You're one of the most, you're one of the busiest performers I know, but also you were one of the guys that did an awful lot with virtual shows when the pandemic hit. A lot of performers just said, right, okay, I'm going to wait this out. But you really focused on virtual shows. So you've continued to be busy, even
Absolutely.
throughout the pandemic. So thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, no problem, man. I think this is fun, and I'm excited to chat.
This is great. Well, you know what? Everybody is going to know who you are. But what I'd like to do, first of all, if that's okay, is just to talk a few minutes about sort of how you got into magic and what you've accomplished throughout your career. And then we can kind of move on through from there, if that's okay. Because a lot of people know certain aspects of what you've done, but they probably don't know the full story. So can I talk about, first of all, your origin story? And you see, I see you've got the Avengers hat on. I'll call it an origin story. I know you worked on Ant-Man. We'll get to that later on. But let's talk, first of all, about your origin story. How did you get into magic? Where did that all come from?
I grew up in Orlando, Florida, and around theme parks. And at first, I think magic sort of like just seeped in from going on the Disney attractions and trying to figure out how the effects work, like the Haunted Mansion and things like that. And then I was a kid and I saw a magician he called himself H.P. Lovecraft, right? Based, sort of, and he did a medicine show pitch, and he worked at SeaWorld, and he did like a medicine show pitch act with like a whole illusion show and everything else. And that was the first time I ever seen magic like on stage live. And I went, wow, I want to do that. And then a little while later, after getting interested in reading books, I read he recommended the Henry Hay book, Amateur Magician's Handbook, and I read a few other things that I had found in the library. I was at the Disney Studios park, which at the time was called the Disney MGM Studios, and I saw a guy no further away from me than I was from him. That's the old joke, but I mean like 3 feet away from me, with cards and just things in his hands, do miracles. And I went, no. Not box stuff, never mind. I want to do that. And I became sort of obsessed, and I would go and see his show over and over and over again. His name is Terry Ward. He was very nice to me, and eventually became my teacher and my mentor, and he's still like basically my magic father to this day. And so I was 14 when that happened, and then I just kept learning. And what was great about Terry was that Terry was not only a really good performer magically, but he had a degree in theater, and he had access and was friendly with everybody else who worked at Disney in all these different disciplines. So it was great. So if I really wanted to learn sort of the more hardcore gambling sleights, he introduced me to this guy named James Sherrill, who could do real 3-card Monte. And if I really wanted to learn more like the stage, illusion-y type stuff, he introduced me to people like Dan Stapleton, who did like big illusion shows, and did the other theme parks. And so I was able to like learn from him, and then all these other people, plus other performers, or even magicians, jugglers, singers, dancers, you name it. And I sort of like became just like a sponge of all that stuff. And then when I was about 20, so I'm sort of skipping ahead, I got my own show at Disney that Terry helped me get, and I worked at the Rose and Crown pub in the UK pavilion at Epcot as a fake British person.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, here, wait a minute. I think I set a couple. I preset a couple things. So there you go. So there is my old Epcot postcard, me doing the cards and mouth in my Bill Malone phase. And then you can see that was the actual official promo card. And I was in front of the Rosicrucian pub. So I'd perform like a street show and then go inside the pub and do magic in the pub. And that was actually not my first headshot. My first headshot was this one. This is back when I was Harry Potter. And I think I'm 16 in this photo. And anyway, so like that's what I did. And I've never had a real job, for lack of a better term. This is the only thing I've ever done for a living. And then from that point on, if the first part was all those years learning from those performers, in that capacity, then my 5 years at Disney, from the time I was 20 to 25, were basically my university. And I was performing not only in the pub and the fake British accent and doing that character, but then having to do the Diamond Horseshoe where I'd have to be a Western character, or then do, these private events in the Haunted Mansion where I would have to be like this, do spooky stuff, like, seances, the Eugene Burger-esque type magic. And then like I would do, like a character in Frontierland, and I would do a character in Fantasyland, and I would play a wizard or whatever, and I'd have to go over and over and do all these different related shows, the Boardwalk Busker show, or I'd pretend like I was a 1920s busker or whatever. The point is, like, I was doing all these different things, learning from all these people. And so when you're doing 5 shows a day, 5 days a week, 5 to 6, sometimes 7 days a week, over that time, you just get the mileage on the tires. And all those, I'm sure you're a person who lectures and you've seen a lot of lectures, the most common Magic Club question is, well, what happens if? Well, I had all the ifs, like every if happened to me, like, because I had a chance to do those shows over and over again. And then eventually, I was like, all right, well, it's either I stay and I do this, or I decide that it's time for me to go to the next level. And so then I moved from Orlando to Las Vegas and lived there for a little while.
It's really interesting that you say that. And before we move on to the next stage of your career, one thing that I get asked a lot on this channel is, how do we become a super famous, successful magician? And one thing I've said on this channel is, you can't skip the steps. There's no sort of substitute for experience and flight time. Do you think it's really important? I mean, obviously you got that by working in Disney. But I mean, there's lots of other ways that you can do it. In the UK, you've got holiday parks, you've got restaurants, there's so many different places that you can go to get that flight time. Do you think it's really important to actually have that early on in your career and get that experience? Or, is there a way to skip those steps and go straight from learning magic to becoming a high profile corporate magician?
Well, I think it's possible to do anything, but whether or not you're going to excel at it, you should actually have the discipline to put the time in.
Yeah.
Right. So you could learn 6 tricks, be a decent actor, right? You'd have to have that sort of already ingrained, learn 6 tricks, invisible deck, sponge balls, whatever, and then get a corporate gig. That is very possible. I don't think you will succeed in the long run doing that, but you'll get hired once for different companies, and then, it all fizzles out. To be able to actually have a career in longevity, or at least, and this is my experience, I mean, everyone's mileage differs, but I needed to like say the line, see someone get offended, so that I knew not to do the line. I needed a place to be bad. I needed a place to be able to go, oh, I probably shouldn't do this, or I probably should do more of this, and whatever that was, so that I could then build up. So that when I was doing then the quote unquote high profile, gig, whatever that might be, I had that place where I could have hid in the corner in that little pub at Epcot and just run through all the stuff, so that now I had all this material built up so that I can whittle it down. I had the A stuff, and I would go in there and knock it out of the park. And I don't see how else you can do that without the putting the time in front of a real audience.
Okay, that's great advice. Now, you said that at the age of 25, you left Epcot and you moved over to Los Angeles.
I went to Vegas. I lived in Vegas for about a year. I did a show called Caesar's Magical Empire. Not right away. There's a whole like 3-month period where basically I was working at Houdini's magic shop, flipping that card around me, and but I had really good friends. I met these guys who you've never heard of before. One guy named Apollo Robbins and another guy named Rondo Lucero, and all these guys like this. We were just hanging out, and before they were anybody, and then they all were working at Magical Empire, and they're like, hey, this John guy is good. He moved out here from Orlando. You should bring him in. And then I started working at the Magical Empire, and I did that for the last year that it was in operation. And then as soon as that show closed, I moved to Los Angeles to be around the Magic Castle.
So I suppose the first question I've got there is, was moving to Vegas, literally going from one side of the country to the other, was that a difficult decision to make? Because you've got this really cool gig. You've got Disney. You're getting more flight time than you can possibly imagine. You're not having to worry about work because you've got all of this, but you want more. You realize that after 5 years you want more, but it's a big deal saying, right, I'm not going to do that anymore, and taking the risk of going to the other side of the country. And like you say, for the first 3 months you were just working in a magic shop. Was it a big risk? And how important do you think it is in a career to take big risks like that, not knowing that they're going to pay off or not?
In my case, I knew that if I was to keep working at Disney the way I would eventually grow to resent it and believe that I never gave it a chance to see if I could do something else. And my mentor, up until COVID, he worked 30 some odd years. I mean, he's the only magician I know that's going to retire with a pension. You know what I mean? Like he has like a genuine job, like a real job, and he was very good and he was very happy, and a case study, by the way, and how to always keep it fresh, even though you're doing it over and over again. But that I just knew that that's not how I was wired. And so I needed to see if I could go to the next level. And at that time, it was like, all these magicians were moving to Vegas. It was essentially like everyone thought they were just giving out production shows in the airport, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna give it a shot. And then I got there, and of course, the bottom was falling out of it. The whole Vegas was Families thing was dying on the vine, and now a lot of production shows were going away, and they're being replaced by clubs, and it was all about bottle service and things like that now. And sort of the family magic shows were dying considerably. And so I ended up getting very lucky, become friends with some very, very great magicians, just as people, but also as, and then getting at the Magical Empire. And then while I was at the Magical Empire, I really wanted to do my first week at the Magic Castle, and I thought that was going to be my in to do my first week at the castle, and it was. I was able to get in to the Magic Castle because I was able to say that I worked at the Magical Empire. And then I did my first week at the Magic Castle, and I had my tape of my close-up room, my first week at the close-up room, and it literally was a tape. I mean, this is the early aughts. I mean, it was literally a cassette tape, VHS tape. And I had it and gave it to the people who were the production people at Caesar's Magical Empire to look at, so that I could get into what their close-up room was called the Secret Pagoda, and work in there. And just by complete absolute happenstance, the guy who was supposed to finish his month run bailed out on his last week. They didn't have a replacement. They needed a replacement at the last minute. My tape was on top of the pile. I was right there, literally wearing a toga, ready to perform anyway. They're like, here, put a suit on and do the show. And so I ended up doing that final week. And that got me into being a quote unquote close-up headliner there. And it was amazing. Like I would be sharing the shift with Daryl and Michael Amar and, guys like that. And, like literally heroes. And it was crazy. And it was just that thing about being prepared, like luck is, preparation, plus luck, whatever it is, like it's preparation plus time. And so like I just had prepared to be ready for that moment. And then when that moment struck, I was ready to go in and actually do the show.
Wow. That's fantastic. That's awesome. And then off the back of that, when that closed down, obviously you went to Los Angeles, which is where you are now. and you built up a career which has been incredible, and we'll get into that. You said when you first moved to Los Angeles, part of that decision was because of the Magic Castle.
I would almost go so far as to say 97.5% of the Magic Castle, maybe 2% being I would be closer to Disneyland. I mean, it was essentially why I wanted to be there. I would have moved to LA first if I thought I could afford it. I mean, not to get too like in the weeds, but like it's very cheap to live in Florida because there's no state taxes, and it's it's a very cheap place to live. At least it was, especially back then. And Nevada is the same thing because gambling pays for the taxes, so things are very cheap. But California, very expensive, especially Southern California, very, very expensive. And so I didn't think I could afford moving out there initially from Florida. And then I was able to save up some money and essentially, just completely honest, I stayed on couches. I basically couch surfed for the good 6 months when I first moved out to Los Angeles. And I spent my time being around the castle because at that time, it was this group of people who later on become quote unquote, giants in the industry. But it was these guys that I had now, because I had gone out a bunch of times living in Vegas. I'd gone out and hung out at the castle, and again did that week at the castle, whatever, and made friends with a lot of these guys. And so I was hanging out with them, and so it was like Derek Delgadio, and it was John Lovick and Derek Hughes and Rob Zabrecki, and and who are now like huge, right? Like, but we were all just hanging out, and we were just kids. Some of us older than others, but we were just kids essentially. And working on each other's shows and doing shows down in that little basement. And I was so used to doing all those shows, all those years Disney, grinding that out and giving out business cards and talking to people and networking and just getting myself established. That's how I really sort of planted my foot into the Los Angeles scene, and then just kept going from there.
That's fantastic. That's great. Very quickly before we carry on, one question I get an awful lot on this channel is people who want to, a goal of a lot of people is getting a chance to perform at the Magic Castle. It's kind of an aspirational goal of a lot of people. As somebody who's regularly performed there throughout their career, do you have any advice for somebody watching this that wants?
Sure, I can tell you exactly what to do. I mean, and I'll be completely honest about it. I think that is it. How you got into the castle has changed over the years based on what the castle has needed and how the shows are structured. But as of right now, as of when we're talking right now, the end of 2021, I would say the easiest, and I'm air quotes on the easiest way to get into the Magic Castle is to have an act that is unique as possible, that is more apt for the parlor or the stage than the close-up room. The close-up room is very easy to fill. Everybody and their brother seems to want to do close-up or do close-up. The parlor is a very hard room to fill because it's that in-between space between stage and close-up. Stage is also a place where they need people, but they can usually find, the box acts and the bird acts and things like that to work in that facility. It's really hard to find quality parlor acts. And if you can find another performer who has that is your friend, who has a name of some sort and a reputation, has performed at the castle before, and has an established record of some sort. I mean, whatever, one Magic Circle Magician of the Year, whatever, some thing of note. If you're able to then do or create a 2-person or a show with that person and submit that, then you have a better chance of getting into what they call the parlor theater, which is this 2-person room where they do a 2-person show. And Jack Goldfinger, who books the castle, he's always looking for acts that can really intermingle with each other and play off of that, as opposed to just being 20 minutes of one person, 20 minutes of another person. And so that's genuinely like the best advice I can give you. I'm telling you the real truth. And also, you need to submit the full thing. So if you have a 20-minute parlor act that you want to submit that has a bunch of magic in it that you don't think you've seen a million times. For example, if you watch your own show and you're seeing the invisible deck and the multiplying bottles and, bowling ball from briefcase or sketch pad, whoever, you might want to rethink about this. But if you're doing stuff that doesn't seem like everybody and their brother is doing it, submit that 20 minutes, one shot. How hard is it to take your iPhone and stick it right there and do it in front of your friends or whatever, or do, actually film it in a live show, whatever it is, but do that 20 minutes straight through and submit that uncut. That's what they need to see. Yeah. Because if you submit a highlight reel, if you submit, well, I do this and then I could do this and I could do this, it just gets lost. You want to submit exactly what you're going to do, because that way then when he's programming the week, he can say, oh, we got that guy that does that interesting thing with a toilet seat from England. We could put him on because I also have earlier that night is going to be Armstrong and he's just doing his ridiculousness. So that'll work, because they need to know when you're programming the entire Magic Castle, the biggest thing you have to do. And Jack Goldfinger, by the way, has the worst job in all of Magic. He just does, because this is he has to but only deal with the onslaught of magicians trying to get booked, but he also then has to take all of these acts and go, okay, well, he's got Lincoln Rings this week, and this woman over here, she's going to be doing, Ambitious Card or whatever, and like literally has to plan out so that if one person sees all the shows that night, they don't see a single repeated trick.
That's a difficult job, man.
So what do you do to make his job easier? You do a bunch of magic that not everybody's doing. Mm-hmm. And how willing is he then going to be like, oh, it's much easier for me to plug that person in because I don't have to worry about them doing Chinese sticks, and egg on fan.
That's great. That's fantastic advice. That's amazing advice. Now, at what point, because obviously I want to carry on talking about you as a performer, but outside of that, you've also built up an incredible career as a creator, a lecturer. That's something that you've done alongside at the same time. When did that start happening? At what point did you decide, you know what? I don't just want to perform magic, but I've got all of these ideas. I want to start sharing them. I want to start releasing them to the magic community. I want to start lecturing to magicians. How did that come about? Because, not everybody does create, not everybody does lecture. And you've obviously brought out some of the most iconic tricks of all time, which we can talk about. But
sure.
Where did that desire come from? And when did it start?
It started with me doing the act and building the close-up repertoire that I'm talking about, which is very large. And I got to spend some time with Skinner when he was still doing before he retired, the last couple of times that he was like his Vegas residency. And one of the things about Skinner that was always amazing was how he would barrage you with so much magic, and his technique for making sure you never did his stuff was, I'm going to teach you all of it, so you'll never remember any of it. And that was his how he did it. But I always loved the idea that he could really just, like, he was a sponge and that he could just do it, all this stuff. And so I kind of took, that was something I also, I guess, had that ability. I would never say that I'm a major magic, quote unquote, creator, like a whole cloth creator. There's people in magic who are very good at creating like from a blank page. I'm more of a researcher and developer. I sort of like massage things and put things together and, and add to things. And so that was another thing that Skinner was very good at as well. And so I basically became sort of wanting to put a storehouse, as much magic knowledge as I possibly could into my brain so that I could just perform and never have to repeat a trick, just because I just thought it was something cool that Michael did. And so I made friends, and one of the friends I made was Max Maven, and Max Maven is still a very good friend to me to this day. And I would hang out with Max and have lunch with Max, and we talk about, mostly we talked about politics and other random stuff about the castle, but the one and a shared love of wrestling. But anyway, the thing about Max, when I would talk about magic, is that he was very Max is a walking encyclopedia, but he was impressed that I had as much knowledge as I could, maybe a tenth of what he had, but still a lot. And he recommended to Louis Falanga at the sort of like towards the end of the L&L era, right?
Yeah.
That, you know what? This kid just got nominated for a Classic Edition a couple times. He's got some stuff. It's got some great texts and some classics. You should talk to him. And that's when I put out the original L&L set. And from there is when I was really sort of like lecturing because of that. And I was talking about sort of my thoughts about card magic and whatnot. And my lecture became sort of a defense of card magic and the concept that like people don't like card tricks, which I always thought was the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Because if that's the case, is everyone just being really nice to me? Is everyone just being really nice to Juan Tamarez? What's going on? Like everyone's just really nice to Bill Malone. No, people must like good card magic. They might just hate bad card tricks. So how do you make what you're doing into good card magic? And so I became very interested in the philosophy and the thought behind that, and trying to make and really dissecting where the flaws were in card magic and how to make it better for everybody. And what was great about that is that I learned from that, and I came better, and then I was able to hopefully, tell other people, hey, this is a way for you to be able to dissect what you're doing so that you can actually make it far more palatable for people. The thing I was talking about a million times, this is like right from the lecture. If you've seen me lecture like years and years ago, you probably seen me say something like this, but essentially is like, how many times has this happened to you? You take out a deck of cards and you spread them out and someone says, oh, I've seen this before. And you're like, wait a minute, I haven't even done anything yet. Mm-hmm. Right? But why are they saying that? What is the real thought process the layman is having when they're saying that, and why are they saying it? And so that became like a major focal point for me, trying to dissect that. And the answer real quickly is that like they've seen the trick where you pick a card and put it back in, and as soon as you say pick a card, as soon as you do this, you're lowering your status, because they're now associating it with the card trick they've seen Uncle Ted do at the family dinner, where he takes out the deck and he finds, the moment you do this and say pick a card, they know how it ends. And the joke I always said was you're either going to find the card or you suck. You only have two endings. I don't care how impressive your ending is normally. In the layman's mind, you have two endings.
Yeah.
And so how then are you able to keep status to add what I felt was the most important thing that card magic was usually lacking, and that was surprise. And that was engagement, and that was an emotional hook. And so that was what I would really talk about. And my magic sort of like really was focused on that. And so like the stuff that I've put out over the years, again, I wouldn't say are revolutionary. I don't stand on the same shoulders as Luber Fielder and guys like David Regal. David Regal wakes up in the morning and like just two tricks pop out of his brain. That's just how that guy lives. But like I'm trying to give people like a reason why they want to watch you hold on to a piece of a deck of 52 pasteboards. Why do you care? And so yeah, that's what I talked about for years and years and years and years.
That's amazing. A couple of questions on that, if you don't mind. You
Sure.
mentioned L&L. I did very quickly want to bring that up. You were one of the last people to put out a full-on L&L DVD set. I miss those days. I really do, compared to what we have now, whereas there's a million tricks coming out every hour and instant downloads. Back in those days, you knew when you got an L&L DVD set, it was going to be some incredible magic that you could just literally lock yourself in a room with and just spend a month just dissecting it. And I think the magic misses those days. What was it like filming those L&L DVD sets?
It's insane because, you know, like that audience was more famous than me.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I always wanted to like do like, you know, one of those, you know, behind the music or true Hollywood stories of the L&L audience, you know, like, where are they now? What are they doing? You know, there were a reunion audience where they come back in and, you know, I think that'd be the funniest thing at Magic Live. Like, you know, Stan brings back the L&L audience and allows you to perform for them just for one night, you know, I mean, it would just be hilarious. But like, so I mean, I was recommended through Max, and then I came up with what I felt was the set, and I did the shows, and it was just surreal just being there because again I had learned, you know, and saw all those things from the very beginning, and it was amazing. And then at the same time that I was filming, Pendragon was filming some of the segments for his set, right? So I got to see, you know, again, somebody of huge stature to me, still one of my favorite magicians of all time, completely, you know, honestly, and talking about his stuff, you know, talking about these illusions that were, you know, iconic, and it was amazing. So yeah, and you know, it's just like you would expect it to be. They never seeded any of them. They never told any of them overreact, do this, do that. There was never any stage direction given to them whatsoever. And people will all have always said, oh, you know, they were always hyped up. No, I just think they were happy to be there. And Lewis had like spreads of food and booze, so they were just having a good time. They just ate a bunch of food and they had just drank a bunch and they were having a good time. And so like most of the people who did it, you know, if they were, I guess, of any sort of caliber, would just do it in one straight take, you know. And I think I like had like a couple takes here or there, but for the most part I just did it in one straight take. And so it was a show for them. They just got to see a bunch of cool magic. And again, it wasn't the best show because again, you're putting together a bunch of tricks that really don't necessarily fall together as a show. But for the most part, you know, it was a blast, and I was very proud to be part of that legacy.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. And then you think about, you know, you've released a lot of magic. Obviously, your DVD sets are incredible and still available now. But I think the thing that you're most known for as a creator is Tiny Plunger, right?
Sure. That'll be on my tombstone. Here lies the guy who created Tiny Plunger.
And I love the fact that you sell Tiny Plungers to lay people on your site. You know, it's like, hey, buy your own. I love that. I mean, it's such an iconic trick, and it's a perfect example of taking a card trick and making it more than just a card trick, more than just a pick a card trick, by implementing this plot. Where did that come about from? Because honestly, yeah, as somebody who actually performs Tiny Plunger, I think it's one of the, and I'm not just saying this because you're here, I got a reputation for saying what I think it's one of the best tricks of all time because it just has everything. It's got a really interesting hook. It's got a lot of funny byplay, but it's also an incredibly strong trick. It happens in the spectator's hand. It's just perfect in my opinion.
Well, that's very kind. You know, it's funny. I don't watch a lot of magic related things online, unless I'm like researching something or whatever. But obviously, if it involves me, I've probably seen it. And one of the only times I've actually ever watched what you've done, Craig, in the past, is I think the review back in the Wizard product review days, again, something I think I've seen maybe 3 episodes of. And one of them was when you talk about the plunger and you loved it and your partner did not like it as much. I'm trying to remember exactly, like it was like he didn't give it a bad rating, he gave it like a middling rating, but like you were like, no, this is the greatest thing ever. And he's like, and I always thought that was very funny to me because I think there were some people, especially at the beginning, who were like, well, can you get away with all the things that he's doing with this, you know, putting it on people's heads and things like that? And I'm like, I can. I do. I don't know if others can, because I think everybody's personality is different. But like, I mean, that thing has been on, no joke. It's been on Bill Gates's head, Johnny Depp's head, Neil Patrick Harris's head. It's been on. It's been on Joe Biden's head. It's been on a lot of people's head. Kevin Feige, the president of Marvel Studios, like it's been on a lot of people's head, and they all seem to have been hired. They've hired me for other things. No one seems to be upset with me. So I think it's all in how you play everything.
Yeah.
And but getting back to the actual answer to your question, I saw that because this is going to come as a shock to you, but I collect comic books. I know, I don't look like the guy. And anyway, I collect comics, and I'm really into this sort of that Comic Con type of thing. And I've always go to the shows, comic book shows and stuff. And when I was at one, there was a table full of all these random things, for Japanese stuff. And one of the items was this plunger, and I had never seen a suction cup before actually able to quote unquote suck. Like most suction cups on like dart guns are like terrible. You can't actually do anything with them, but this one was really able to do stuff, and it was designed as like an iPhone stand. So I started playing around with it, and for years I wanted to do the guess your weight routine, which is the Bob King routine with the breather crimp. And essentially, like it's Martin Nash did a very famous routine with it, and a bunch of other people. The idea of like you name a number of cards, and I cut off that exact number of cards. And I just could never make that work for me, And there was the Pitt Hardlings thing, the flick, which is his really great take on it. But that didn't work for me either. And so when I started playing with the plunger, it really sort of resonated, and the full routine sort of just came out like the way that I'm still doing it today. And I mean, I do it all the time. Came out basically from that first weekend. Like I was in my hotel room at the convention coming up with what became the thing. And lo and behold, the idea of the card sticking up like this and staying, Matthew Beach got there way before me. You should honor the first man on the moon, not the second man on the moon. And he got there first before me, and had this routine with like sticky tack and a pin, and then was picking up cards and whatever. And it was a routine that he had for a while. And then I did this thing with the plunger, and later on, I think it was actually Tom Stone at the Magic Castle was like, that you should talk to Matthew about this. And I showed him the routine. We started, well, he's like, this is better, but this is my idea. And I'm like, yeah, that's your idea. You got there first. I mean, it's simple as that. And so we worked together on what eventually became the product that came out. And then when later on when we went to Tenyo, and it became a Tenyo product, which is still one of the most insane things in my entire life, that my picture is on a Tenyo box.
That's so cool.
It's insane to me. But we worked together on that, and it was Matthew's genius that came up with the Tenyo version of it, which was because they want a much more streamlined thing, but it's my routine. And anyway, so if you talk to Matthew, he will say that it's both of us, and I will tell you 100% it was both of us. So the routine that I do, the one that I do in my show, essentially is the same. I mean, I just added all these lines and bits to it. It's what was sold in the original thing, in the original packaging, and just sort of weird handlings that I had for the breather crimp. Being able to get in and out of a deck without having to like make a big deal out of it, and some other interesting things that I have with the way the routine is structured, the way it plays out, the gag of making people like think, say, hey, the plunger's looking at the card, and the plunger actually does see the card, and all these things that happen, is the structure of the routine in which I do. And right now, like how I make my living is not really as a close-up magician. I work on Disney Cruise Line. I work in a 1,000-seat theater doing stand-up material. And the only close-up trick that I do in my show is this. So I have a camera and a screen, and I usually get two people out of the audience, and I do the routine on stage, and that's it. The rest of my show is all a stand-up material that I've been working on. We can talk about that later. But essentially, that is that is what gets me through the door. Like that is the trick that I've done on the Today Show, the Tonight Show, Penn and Teller, Masters of Illusion. It's a trick that I've done like all the TV appearances that I've ever done, and it's opened huge amounts of doors for me. Like I said, it will be on my tombstone. It's what's paying for the little one's diapers. Not just me selling the trick, but me still performing the trick. You know, and that was one of the things I always loved about Daryl, was that when you saw Daryl do his show, he was doing the tricks that he sold.
Yeah.
Like he just didn't sell a bunch of tricks and then just did whatever he, you know, other stuff. He always like, I think, you know, generosity slash, you know, being, you know, walking his talk, right? You know, like these are the material that I actually do for lay people, and he really was. And so like, yes, I still sell this trick, but I'm still doing this trick like every night. If I'm on a stage, I am doing this trick. So yeah, I mean, it's been a huge ride for me, and it's been amazing that like that, you know, I've been able to make friends with, you know, guys like Matthew Beach, and have something that I think is essentially sticking around in the magic world, even beyond you know, when I leave.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely incredible. Let me ask you one last question on creativity as we're on this subject.
Yeah, whatever.
I get lots of people that come on the channel that say, oh, how can I create and release magic? And I think these days, especially, even more so than back in the day, we put creators of magic up on pedestals. And a lot of new people that come into magic, they kind of go, that's what I want to do. Excuse me, I want to be that guy. You know, you see the Greg Wilsons and the Jay Sankis of the world at conventions, and people are like, oh, I want that to be me. And I think it's a double-edged sword, because part of the problem then becomes that people rush into releasing downloads before they're ready to start creating and releasing magic. And that's why we see a lot of substandard products. But there's still that desire there to want to actually create. As somebody who's created and released a lot of magic and, you know, had an L&L DVD set, is there any advice you can give for people that are in magic that desire to be somebody who's releasing product and be a big name in the magic community as a product creator?
You know, I don't know if that's an attainable goal the way it used to be. I think for the most part, it's almost like chasing the dragon, which is the heroin analogy, which is stay with me. But here we go. If you put out a product, it is going to be have a far smaller shelf life than it ever used to. Give me an example. Cartoon. When Dan Harlan put out Cartoon, that thing still is a viable trick, but I mean, when that thing was a huge seller for years and years and years and years, that doesn't really happen the same way now, because there's always this the new trick is coming out, and there's new thing. And so once you have, I don't think a sustainable career, either if you're just looking for the monetary aspect of it or the quote unquote fame of it, is to rely on being a magic creator. I think then you end up you start crossing into where you're just trying to put out as much as you possibly can. So you might be a little looser on your morals here. You might be a little looser on what the quality of this. You might be a little looser on whether or not that belongs to you or not. You know, that type of stuff. And it's not chasing that dragon. And I think that's a very hard thing to obtain. If I was to give someone advice in this capacity, I would say, take a bunch of material that you've done a gajillion times, because that plunger trick got done a gazillion times before I ever just, it was never like, hey guys, look at this thing after that weekend. It was like a year later before I was like, you know what, I think I might want to put this out. And I think you need to take a piece that actually has a road tested, that you really do, that you really perform.
Yeah.
And then when you put it in the market with the kind of care, like the kind of instructions that like really are talking about the ins and outs of the effect and what, you know, how it plays and why it plays and all that sort of stuff, then it really reverberates and it stays around longer, and you have a better shelf, has a better shelf life. And then that way, when you release things that are really more important over a smaller period of time, I think you have a better chance of actually being, I don't know, like, I don't know, you know, just more successful, maybe not successful, more revered, more, you know, respected. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. You know, more trusted, that the stuff that you're putting out is going to be of quality, so that more people have a tendency to want to buy it. Like, still to this day, I haven't lectured really, other than like, you know, I think we all did a bunch of Zoom lectures because we were, you know, in the pandemic and we had nothing else better to do. But like, I haven't gone out and done a lecture tour in 6-10 years, I can't even remember, you know. But when I still did the Plunger, like if I would go out and I would do the Plunger at a lecture, I would sell them. Like, it was like, you know, it's a kind of dealer item that would be like a Svengali deck or cartoon, you know what I mean? Like I knew I could sell them if someone saw me do the trick. You can't say that about everything that gets put out as a download nowadays. And I would like to think that people want to have the kind of material that they know when people see it, they're going to want to do it. And that's, I think that comes with time, not with just rushing to market.
That's, yeah, absolutely brilliant advice. And I completely agree with you 100%. I think a lot of people do rush tricks out before they're ready. And you can tell when something's been well thought out when it comes out. Outside of creativity, you know, obviously we've talked about you as a performer. You've built up a huge, really successful career as a performer, and you know, very highly in demand. But one thing that you've done very successfully is another thing that becomes a goal for a lot of magicians, which is you've worked quite regularly on TV as a consultant and as a performer. You know, and as a huge Marvel fan, I know that you were involved in Ant-Man, which was probably out of everything.
Yeah, the first one. To be clear, Ant-Man and the Wasp, it actually had real magic in it. That was Blake Boyd. Blake worked on that. He's actually in the little screen when he's doing that. One of the things that kills me the most is that I was supposed to go out and do WandaVision to help the actor who plays Jimmy Woo, the FBI agent, to do the back palm from the card, and I was supposed to go do that. And the only day it worked out was the only day I was not available for that month, and I couldn't go and do it. It was it just crushes me. But yeah, when Edgar Wright was still on the production, they had a different angle that they were taking with the Paul Rudd's character, with the Scott Lang's character, and he was going to do a little more sleight of handy type of things, and I was working on that. And so that was a huge thrill. And then of course things changed, and he decided to move on, and other people took over, and the production went another way. And then but I've got a chance to work on like all these other TV shows. The Mentalist for years. I worked on a show called Shut Eye, Supernatural. You know, I worked on episodes of like just random TV shows, everything from Arrested Development, where I actually got to be in the picture of the where it says, you know, we demand to be taken seriously. Like, I'm in that photo, right, which is amazing. And like episodes of The Office, working with like where he did the bad escapes and things like that. Like I got to do some really fun, The American Office. I got to do some really fun things over the years because I was just here. People knew me from the castle, and you know, like got a good reputation from being, you know, I guess just reliable and being able to actually teach the actor what they needed to know to get to the scene. So that was great. And then I've gotten to work, you know, theatrically, and then work on some theme park stuff with Disney Imagineering and Universal Creative. And I've got to, like, if you go to the Wizarding World of Harry Potter and the Orlando theme park, there's an illusion that I helped with where you look like you're going through platform 9 3/4. And this really cool stuff that, like, over the years, as a theme park fan, as someone who literally reads 3 to 7 theme park blogs a week, no joke, and does all this stuff, is really into that. the fact that I got to actually work on some of this stuff and consult with some of these people is insane to me. And I got to work on some projects for Disney Cruise Line, and again, because again I work on the ship right now as a performer, but they've used me now to help, teach people magic for different other shows they're doing, and working on the Doctor Strange show and things like that. So yeah, it's fun.
That's awesome. And outside of everything you've done as a consultant, which is huge, the times that you've performed on television as a performer, various different things that you've done, was it a goal of yours to get on television? Was that a kind of a goal, or was it something that just happened and you just kind of went with it? And
no, I think it's a goal for anybody who wants to, obviously. I mean, I'm trying to make a living, right? And so I would say up until about 10 years ago, I was trying to make my living as a cards only close-up magician. That's basically all I did. Mm-hmm. And so the more I could put myself in positive positions out in the greater universe where people could see me, and I was doing these routines and entertaining people, and I could then use that as collateral to get clients to hire me for whatever corporate event or private event or whatever it might have been, then that's what I needed it for. I mean, the thing about TV exposure, especially unless you're doing something where you have your own TV show, and even that nowadays is, you get lost in the 10 million streaming channels that there are, is that it's very fleeting. If back in the day, there was 3 channels, and if you were on one of the channels, everyone saw you. Now that doesn't happen. So it's very fleeting. So you need to be able to then take that material, whatever that is, that sort of that content, and then be able to then push it back to them as collateral that you are worthy of their dollars for you to hire them. That is what that's for. It's not the appearance itself, it's what you do with the appearance. And that's what I was doing with it. So yes, I was actively trying to get on Masters of Illusion, which I did, and actively getting on Penn and Teller's Fool Us, which I did, and so on and so forth. I was actively doing that. And so in the Today Show and all these other appearances I've done on local television and blah, 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 blah. So, and then the stuff that I got to do where I actually got to be on camera, like on a national show, it's, the latest thing was when I was on Lucifer, and literally the lead character, Lucifer, the title character, points to me and says, "Oh, that's Jon Armstrong. He's one of the greatest card magicians in the world," which, you can take that for whatever you want, but it's in the script, it's on the kit, and this guy, and I have this clip of this Netflix TV show that's very famous here in the United States, at least. And I can show that and be like, here's collateral that I am somebody of worth, and that's just a great thing. Plus, I mean, that show is DC canon, DC universe canon. So technically I'm in the DC universe. So there you go. Well, pretty great.
Greatest achievement of all time, in my opinion. That's
for my opinion, exactly. I'm in the same world as Batman, according to canon now.
That's awesome. Very quickly on the subject of Penn and Teller Fool Us, that's something that also a lot of magicians want to do.
Sure.
Was that did they approach you, or was that something that you
I was very early in the process. So
that's why I want to ask you, because obviously we know now, when we look at and now that they're not gonna, because Penn and Teller had a reputation of not exposing tricks back in the day and not really casting magicians in a great light. And then you have this TV show that's like, hey, we're gonna try and figure out magicians' tricks. And you were very early on in that process. It's like, was there you don't see that now, because we know the format of the show. We know they're not going to expose anything or make acts look silly. But back very early on, a lot of people didn't really know how they were going to do this format. Was that a concern of yours, or?
Well, not really. I mean, you had years of the UK show, because the American show was, I think 4 years or so into the UK show. I think you had one more year of the UK show at the same time that they were still doing the American show, and then they just started doing the American show. I think you guys get reruns now of our show as opposed to the other way around. And how it worked was that I saw that, and look, I've always been a fan of Penn and Teller. I've got it. Like I got it. The idea was they're not really exposing anything, or what they are exposing, they're exposing in such a way that people are just going to appreciate it more. Yeah. And they really have a deep love of magic, especially Teller, and a grand knowledge of magic. And so like I always got it, and I was always, you know, a fan, and I was very lucky that I got to, you know, over my years just know those guys, and tangentially. I'm not saying we're best friends, you know, I know them for things. And so how I got on the show is a completely different way than I think most people get on the show, because again, how it worked here is that there was the years of the UK show. They the first American season was essentially a cut show of the best of the UK seasons, and then the first American filmed shows were going to be that second season. And so in that case, this is the year that Jonathan Ross was still the host before they went for the American host, which is the woman from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Alison Hannigan. And so I just got a call from Johnny Thompson, because Johnny had seen me at the castle, and I know Johnny because of the castle and because of things like that. And Johnny said, "Hey, would you do that plunger thing on Penn and Teller's Fool Us?" And I said, "Sure." And that was the end of it. Like, I don't have an audition process story. I submitted all these things, nothing like that. Literally, Johnny calls me. I said, sure. The next thing, I got an email from a casting producer, because obviously it goes to the casting people, and Johnny's not really in charge of that. And so then I worked with the casting people who, you know, did all the stuff, and then I did the show, and that was the end of it. You know, and when I walked on stage, because they still, I mean, I don't know if you've ever done a show, but they run it like a game show, and an American game show law is very strict. You have to have all these rules so that there's no cheating, because it's still technically a game show, even though it's not really, but it still falls in our game show law. So they're sequestered. They don't know the acts that are going to come out. And so when I came on stage, like, you don't see this on, you know, in the cut, but like I see Penn and Teller go, "Oh, that's Armstrong. I wonder what he's going to do." Like they knew me. And so like,
so they must have known Tiny Plunger.
No, they've never seen it.
Wow.
They've never seen it. And so all of those reactions that I'm getting from both of them are completely genuine. They loved it. If you ask Penn Jillette to this day what is his favorite card trick, he will tell you the Tiny Plunger. And so, no, I didn't fool them. But the joke I always say is when people say, "Did you fool them?" I go, "Does that really matter?" And so, no, I didn't fool them, because, you know, Teller has heard of a breather crimp before. And then I was, not to get too in the weeds, but really quickly, the act before me had gotten into a fight with Penn, a full-on verbal fight over whether or not they had actually figured it out. And Penn was not too happy about it. And so the producers had just walked backstage. This act had left. They walked backstage and said, "Hey, did you watch the monitors?" And we said, "Yeah." He goes, "Don't do that. If you want to be on TV, if they get anywhere close to being right, say yes, say thank you, and get off the stage. We can't have that again." And so when I got out there, I was like, he just had to go, "Bleh," and I'm like, yeah, that's it. Like he just literally had to exhale and breathe, and I'd be like, "Yeah, that's it. You got it." Like, I was not going to get into any sort of, and if you watch the clip, you see for a moment Jonathan Ross wants to do that same thing that just happened last time. So you'd say, "Oh, I can see your little," no, they got it. Like, I'm not going to laugh. No, they got it. So that's what happened. And it was crazy. But that became the first trick of the first episode of that first live taped season.
Wow.
So that was, I would open, and it was a big thing. Like, I was on, like, if you go to Hulu at the time, it was me, with Penn and Teller. That was the screen that was on Hulu. And so, like, I loved that. Like, that was great. And I've used that clip. I have ridden that clip so hard, Craig. Oh my God. The amount of money I have just ringed out of that clip is ridiculous. Because I mean, I've been asked on many occasions. I went on it sounds like a humble brag, but I've been asked to do it, to go back, because they're looking for people, and I always say no, because I just don't think I can ever do that. Like, I don't. That's it. Like, I just have nothing else that I think is going to get that reaction, and I would be worried that I wouldn't get that reaction again, and I don't want to jinx it. So.
That makes sense, but it shows, how many doors have been opened by you creating this one trick.
Yeah,
and it's amazing. Again, going back to creativity and people rushing out tricks, if you spend your time in it like you have with Tiny Plunger, just listening to the amount of doors it's opened up for you, it's insane. It's crazy.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, like, if you put the effort into something, then you can have that longevity. I think people, really creative people, have that cartoon, that that scotch and soda, that thing in them. They just have to be willing to give it the time to really let it cook and not take it out too soon. That's the thing. I think I know. I know, because as much as I say I don't spend a lot of time watching magic related stuff like on YouTube and things like that, or spending much time in magic forums, things like that, we can talk about that if you want to, or why I don't do that. I am a voracious new trick watcher. Like, I research everything. Like, I have a subscription to Penguin Live. Like, I watch all that stuff. Like, I've gone to all those master classes that Vanishing Ink does. Like, I've seen, I want to know all that stuff, and I want to keep up with what's going on. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen tricks that are put out either in lectures or in whatever form that I know that are, to use a better, I don't know how else to say this, half-baked, like not done, like unfinished products that are still being put out because it's a decent idea. And that then I take that last little thing and then I go, if I add this and I allow this to go, and let's see if that works. Let me change that. And now I could take that and do that into my act, and it becomes an essential part of what I'm doing in my shows. So it's really interesting, and that's how I've been able to essentially do a bunch of material that no one else is really doing, because I'm taking all these things that people have forgotten because they didn't seem like the greatest tricks when but I saw the potential, and hopefully then sort of developed it from them at that point. So.
Did you when I was doing research for this interview, am I correct in saying you had your own Netflix documentary as well?
Well, it's not, I was one of 4 people who was in this documentary. It's called Magician's Life in the Impossible, and it played in a bunch of different film festivals, and then eventually Netflix bought it. And they filmed me over 5 years. Wow. So you can, and at the time I was far heavier and not in very good shape, and a very sad part of my life, because I had married and got divorced during that 5 years. That was my first wife. I am in a much better, wonderful relationship with the wife and mother of my child now, but at the time that's what was going on. And so that it catalogs that journey. And the movie, if you've ever seen it, and you should watch it because it's actually very interesting, and I think you would get a lot out of it, because you are sort of in this space and constantly talking to other magicians. But if the movie has a theme, it's that even when you're living your dreams, life can still be really hard. Yeah. And usually what ends up happening in most sort of documentaries or life stories, whatever, is they become a successful singer, songwriter, dancer, magician, actor, whatever, and then they live happily ever after. And what this documentary was really sort of proposing was these people have become successful in their careers, but it's not always the easiest path forward.
Mm.
And I think a lot of people, it sort of jarred people. I think a lot of people who didn't see that were like, oh, I just want a happy ending. And so it was a tougher thing for some to watch. And it's weird. It's because it follows David Menken, who's a successful performer here in Los Angeles, Brian Gillis, who was a classic performer on the Tide Show, so on and so forth, but who's no longer with us, myself, and Jan Woven, the illusionist, who got brought up on charges of having lots and lots and lots of child porn. So it was a really weird thing to be a part of that, because again, they were following me independently. I didn't, I mean, I know Brian very well. I know David from the castle, but I never met Jan Woven. And so it was really weird that being there, and then movie coming out right around the same time that movie that was being exposed, that he got caught by the FBI with all that illegal stuff. And so there's a lot to that movie, so much to the point where I will say that I've been on Netflix, and I've say that I have that I was in this movie, but I never used any clips of it ever in any of my stuff. I'm very proud of the film. I want to be clear about that. Like, I'm proud I'm in the movie. I think the movie is making a very good point, but it's not the kind of thing that I want to show the Disney audience, because all I need is some person to look up child porn related to the film, and then there goes my Disney career. Yeah. So man, but it is a good movie, and you should get a chance to watch it. And I think you could get on iTunes for like $2 or something.
Yeah, I'll definitely watch that. I want to talk to you about what you're doing now with stand-up, but before I do, one question that I have to ask. I don't know how well you know Eric Jones.
Very well. I mean, I would say we are casually acquainted. I hate when people say we're best friends, because that's another thing that I'm very adamant about, is that, like, I try to keep my career and my personal life separate. I think the easiest way to become very disillusioned and very depressed by magic is that that your life and identity is of a magician. And I don't want to do that. I try my best to have my magic career and then my other life and hobbies. Mm-hmm. And keep those two things separate, because that way, everyone gets a little disappointed with their job sometimes, but you buck through because it's your job and you need to move on. If all of my social circle is because of magic, if all of the people that, if everything that I do, if all my identity is tied up in one thing, I think that would be really tough. I mean, I don't want to catch aspersions, but I may or may not remember you leaving magic at some point, or
for about
and
8 or 9 years.
And so I think that happens when you're not able to sort of to really separate those two things. And I have been very adamant about, these are work relationships, these are real friendships, and keeping all of that separate. And the worst thing about it, without getting too deep into a rabbit hole, is that I think during the pandemic, we found it was so much better. The world was so much better before social media. And I'll explain to you why social media has made things bad, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. We could have acquaintances before social media. Acquaintances. Where all you did was meet up at that one time at the convention or at the Magic Circle or wherever, and you talked about the thing that you guys had in common, and you went your separate ways. And you just were acquaintances. It was nice. It was nice to have acquaintances, and those are nice to have people in those pockets. But then whenever you want, can just find out exactly what they think about religion and politics and science and everything else. You start really distancing yourself from these people. You get into fights in ways that you never would have if you were just being acquaintances. And this idea of friends, I think, has really actually torn people apart, which is why I separate myself from all of that as much as possible. I try not to delve. Like, someone tagged me in your thing, which is the only way I would have seen it, because I haven't looked at a news feed in years. I just don't do it. Like, you have to, like, literally, get a hold of me. So I try to separate all that out, and I found that to be a really good way. I mean, it means I still love magic, and I still consider magic something that I'm really passionate about. I love, and I still love magicians, and I still love hanging out with magicians, because I can separate I can be excited with our together love of magic, and not have to worry about whether or not I agree with them on all these other topics.
I totally agree. And I think out of everything you've spoken about, if there's people watching this that have one take home, that's something that's absolutely, really, really important to understand. I see people all the time getting burnt out. And so, they're up till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, just arguing on forums about various different stuff. And it's like, man, there's more important things to do. So,
yeah. Because I'm sure I've seen like basic. I stay away from it. I think the circle is having. So I occasionally saw something like Frey Presto doesn't really like something that happened in the circle, and people are upset about something about the circle. That stuff happens here at the castle. And I just eliminate it all. Like I just don't look at it, and I zoom right past it if I ever see it. So yeah, it's made me a lot saner and kept my brain a lot more focused these days. But back to your question, Eric Jones, lovely man, who I've broken bread with. So I would say that he is a fellow Disney cruise ship entertainer.
His career, from speaking to, is quite run parallel in many ways. He used to lecture and release magic an awful lot. He's moved away from that now. He used to do close-up magic. Now he's doing Disney Cruise Lines. He's doing stand-up material. There is a parallel between the two of you in many ways.
And this is not in any disrespect to Eric. I want to be very clear. I love Eric. He is really, his show on Disney is very much a camera and screen close-up show. There is stand-up elements to it, but there's a lot on cameras and screens. He is using a lot of his television appearances to sort of highlight and then say, hey, would you like to see what these guys saw on AGT? And then, do the thing. And then he's, and it's a really great, it's a really well choreographed show. It's not like he just puts a fucking camera on sticks and does tricks like this. He's using the cameraman as an actual part of the show, and it's really well done. That's all I'm trying to say. Like if you're going to watch a camera in screen close-up show on a big stage, he's doing probably one of the best ones out there.
Yeah,
but it's not really stand-up material in the way that I would identify it. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and I totally agree with that. And I want to talk in a second about your stand-up material. And sure. This question is kind of relating to that, because you've said for many, many years, you were you focused just as a card magician on card magic. Sure, I'm guessing you're doing other stuff that's non-card related now as a stand-up performer.
Absolutely.
Which I want to talk about. But before I do, one thing that Eric said when I interviewed him is, he said, controversial statement, but I think that every single magician in the world that's a close-up performer should learn coin magic, because there's certain elements to learning coin magic, certain things that you can learn from coin magic that you can only learn from working with coins, and that will make you a better card magician. As somebody who primarily focused on card magic and kind of didn't go down that route for many years, would you agree with that statement? For people,
I completely agree with it. I completely agree with it, because here's the thing: whether or not I was performing it, I still learned as much as I possibly could. And I was always trying to apply everything to the card magic that I was doing. So I learned a bunch of coin magic. I can show you, I could do Ramsey coin and cylinder. I could do all of these things that I learned because, shadow coins and, a standard Ashlinger matrix. I learned all of that stuff. I learned full tilt cups and balls, the Vernon routine. I learned the Vernon routine. I learned Don Allen chop cup routine. I learned as much as I possibly, the sympathy of the rings for Vernon. I learned all of these things that I never ever performed, because I was taking those ideas and then applying it, because I wanted to learn about magic, because again, magic was my passion, and so it still is my passion. It's something I wanted to learn, but I was not putting it into my show. So about 10 years ago, I just realized that I had to make a change in my life about what I was going to do moving forward with my career. And this is a personal choice. This is not I look down upon anyone who thinks this. It's not this at all. But I just couldn't handle going up to that next group of people one more time. I just didn't want to deal with that anymore. And don't be wrong, I've still done, I did some walk around like the last couple months, like I've done it, like, but I just didn't want that to be the only thing that I was doing. And I had flirted with having a stand-up show before, like I had like, you know, some things that I was working on, but I never really put the effort into it. And so I put the effort into it. Like I just said, like, what am I really wanting to do? What I really want to do is I want to be able to perform on a stage with just, you know, out of my pockets, Billy McComb, Alan Jackson, you know, British music hall style. Like I literally said that. I'm not just saying that because you're from the UK. Like I literally was that was the imprint that I had in my head of what I was trying to go for. And how am I going to do that? What am I going to do? And so I started learning as much as I possibly could, researching. And what I discovered was that lots have been written about close-up, lots have been written about stage, far less about that middle ground. And I really started having to really take things and apply them, like take close-up tricks and try to make them bigger, take big stage props and try to make them, you know, more manageable, and, you know, sort of like shrink one things, grow other things to build them into this, you know, a set of stuff that actually felt the same as I would if I was performing close up. So this might be to the weeds, but here we go. So I think what ends up happening when we stand up on a stage or have any kind of thing in which is a formal presentation, meaning they're sat and you're standing. It could be 3 people, doesn't matter the size of the people. But if you're standing and they're sat, people respond to you differently. And it goes from being conversational, which is what close-up magic really is, conversational, to presentational. And presentational usually ends up being, because close-up magicians have a hard time feeling that wall. They feel that wall of resistance, and then they start talking at people, and then the wall grows bigger, and then that's where that moat performs. And that's why there's such a cavern to crossing, going from close-up to stage, right?
Yeah.
So what I was trying to do was try to take my voice, the way that I perform, because I really wanted to emulate the idea that I wasn't going to do a big character. I am who I am. And I was going to take those parts of myself, the way that I perform when I perform in close-up, and just make sure that I had that same volume, same character, same persona on stage, and that I was as conversational as I wanted. As conversational as I could be in a presentational format. So that it felt like people were still with me and that they weren't being spoken at. Because especially in the modern era, and as someone who's done a lot of Zoom shows, and you've done a lot of Zoom shows, being spoken at has become very, you know, something that definitely repels people. I want people to feel like they're being welcomed in, that they're being seen, they're an individual and not just part of a sea of faces, right?
Yeah.
So that is what I came up with how I was going to approach this. And so obviously I couldn't just do a bunch of all this card stuff, because I needed to have variety. And the easiest way to add variety, I always talk about this in my old card magic lecture. You don't have to change the prop to add variety, but the easiest way to add variety is to change the prop. So I was going to change the prop, but give that as idea, but keeping this idea that I was going to give them aspects of who I am, my personality, where I was from, more like a stand-up comedian and less like someone, again, presenting just a bunch of stuff to them. Not a lecture, but as a conversation. So it's where it came from. So I mean, I come out and I do like opening bits, and then I do things. I do some card stuff, but again, it's stand-up-y type of card stuff. I eventually will go into the camera screen and do the tiny plunger, and then I'll do some other stuff that sort of wraps up the entire show, and it's all layered. And it feels like a show, even though I could pack it all into one suitcase, one carry-on suitcase. It feels like a big, production. And there was a lot of ideas that I had where I wanted it to make sense to me. So for example, I wanted, a rope routine made no sense to me. I'm the last person that has rope around. What's a rope? But if I took my tie off And I talked about the fact that you have to wear a tie at the Magic Castle, because the Magic Castle something means something to me. And I did a routine with the tie, the way it's a rope, and at the end, the tie turns to a bow tie, and now I wear the bow tie for the rest of the show. There's something there that immediately makes them remember that I did magic, remembers the tie, the whole thing. Everything's about who I am as a person growing up in Florida in a trailer park, which is all true, loving Disney, and it just doesn't hurt that I work on Disney Cruise Line, right? So, I'm talking about, I'm a magician because of this company, and it all sort of like works to them getting to know who I am as a person, and getting to like me, because the way if they like me, then hopefully they will want to see more of my shows, and also get them more comfortable and less like, oh, I don't want to be tricked by the magic-y guy. So that's it. I think I wouldn't say there's good comedy magic, there's bad comedy magic. I'd like to think that I'm in the good comedy magics area section, but it's there's a lot of thought process behind all this different stuff, and I'm lucky enough that I've been able to just research as much as I possibly can, build things into the show, and a couple things I've put out, like I put out the ring and tie. That's actually on a Penguin lecture. I put that out. I talked about this closer that I have with an invisible deck, which will destroy people, which will beat the crap out of people. I had it on my original L&L DVD, and then I expanded it out for this way that I do it now on the in the stand-up show, and it's interesting. But again, that's a card trick, right? So but it doesn't feel like a card trick. It doesn't, it feels like you're getting to know a person, and not this. I'm not just a guy doing things. I'm their friend John. That's the idea. So.
And one last question about that. How did you deal with nerves? And that's a question that comes up on this channel an awful lot. I speak to a lot of close-up performers that want to perform on stage. They want to take that next step. They recognize, and I totally agree with what you say, as a stage performer and a close-up performer, I'd much rather do one 45-minute show and take the audience on a journey than having to, it doesn't matter with close-up how good that group is, within 5 minutes, you've got to go and win an entire another group of people.
You're back at zero. You're constantly just going back to zero over and over and over again.
Yeah, instead of taking people through a journey. I totally agree with you. A lot of magicians that want to take that leap, the thought of performing on stage scares them to death, because there is a world of difference between approaching a group of 5 or 6 people in a cocktail situation to walking out on a stage in front of 100, 200, 300 people, even 50, however many there are, and being the center of attention, and everybody's looking at you. Right, okay, then impress us, magic boy, or whatever it may be. Right. How, as a close-up performer who went into that environment, did you have those nerves? And if you did, how did you deal with that?
Well, like when I first started really working on the show, I would, it's not getting the reactions that I would normally get if I was doing close-up. And in my head, I would just get in my head thinking, guys, if you could only see me do what I really do, like you'd be so impressed. And then I had to stop thinking that, because what do you mean what I really do? This is what you're gonna do. So it's always like this idea of like facing your fears. Like, you have to face your fear. Well, that's nice, but there needs to be more, that needs to be elaborated on if you're really going to do something about facing your fears. And the fear, I think you have to identify what's really going on. And most likely, maybe not everybody, but most likely what is happening is that, again, this conversational, what you're used to, is being changed to presentational, and you're getting a different type of response from the audience. And that is making you second guess yourself, which is allowing that fear to grow and grow and grow and grow. So here's how you combat that. What you do is you go to these gigs that you're doing. And again, I realize that the way things work in the UK is different than things. I mean, actually, there was Noel and a bunch of other guys from London, Noel Quarter and a bunch of other guys. I worked one year, I worked like the Christmas season doing like Christmas shows in the UK, like totally under the table, completely illegally. And so like no work permit whatsoever. But I ended up doing all these shows because they wanted to see if they could get an American, because they had all these extra shows to give away anyway, and they wanted to see if they could get what an American would be able to handle the different situations, because we don't really do wedding magic. You guys do weddings all the time, different situations, the big round tables, we really don't do that. Like, the way things are done there in a walk around situation is completely different than the way things are done here in a walk around situation. So I really learned that. Like I understood, like it took me time to readjust to that, right? So that said, let me explain to you what I feel like you can do, and I think it works no matter where you are. If you can get people to gather around you in a small group and sit down and you stand in front of them, like, when you're in your cocktail, show, or, as you're doing a walk around or whatever, and then you do a couple formal parlor stuff and just get used to what that feels like. The more you do that in a situation that's more comfortable for you, which in this case would be a close-up situation, the more you're able to sort of transition them into that sort of platformy, parlor-y type situation, so that you get used to it. And then you're getting more comfortable, which is going to make you more conversational. So you're going to be able to play more and you're going to get more comfortable. And what I would suggest is to build a 20-minute to 10 to 20-minute parlor show. Do that parlor show anytime you can, for as many people as you can do it for. So literally, if you can do it for 4 people, you can do it for 20 people, whatever, just do it. And just doing it over and over and over and over again. That way you'll feel like, wait a minute, I see the difference here. Wait a minute, if I pause here, I'm going to get the laugh that I wouldn't have gotten if I would have, talked over this or whatever. And so you're actually really playing it, filming it as much as you possibly can. And so that way you are used to the feeling. And that is how you're going to conquer those nerves. Because if you do a parlor situation, where in this case, where they're sitting down in chairs and you're standing in front of them, so no stage, just, they're at one level and you're there. When you get on a stage where you're elevated and you're on a mic and they're in the dark, it's like step away. It's like that little baby step in between the two steps. Because if you go right from, I'm having a nice conversation with you and right here, I could touch you and you can pick the cards and everything, to immediately being on a platform stage in front of a microphone. There's a huge moat, and it's going to be so hard for you to cross it. You need to be able to actually build those little steps up to get to where you're going to go. And another thing is then to really understand blocking and how, whether or not you need to bring someone up on stage. And once you actually have someone up on stage with you, how you interact with them, and then what you're going to do to bring them back down. Like, that's so important. Like, if you could really focus on that, those two things, that's stepping stones to get towards the bigger platform, and what you're going to do when you bring someone up. Because you can't just do what you normally would do, which is, here, grab this, here, touch this, here, hold this. Because you can't do that. Because they're too far away. Or in this case, it's just going to be weird, because the moment I take this object and I give it to someone in the audience, it vanishes. It goes away, right? I need to bring someone up here so that they can hold the object, so everyone can see the object up here, right? So, but what am I going to do with that person? Like, is there just going to be an object holder? Well, that makes no sense. What do I have to do to write to make this person feel like they're a part of something and not just a prop, a human prop? And so that's where it all comes from. Like, if you can really identify those things, and there's people who've written about this. I've written about this. I've talked about it in places. I'm actually working on a book about some of this stuff. John Graham's book, Stage by Stage, that just came out with Vanishing Ink. It's a great book on this type of stuff. You've ever seen Carissa Hendricks lecture on what her stage stuff? It's great. Rob Zabrecki, the ABZs of all this stuff is, this is that type of thought process, and we're all going along those lines. So yeah, that's what it is. I mean, like, it's really just building this sort of in-between show that then you can then expand upon, so that eventually you can then put it on a stage. And the way I always have described it, because this will be very helpful when you look through magic literature, when you're trying to build the material to do this show. Think of platform as the stand-up as the middle. Stand-up is the middle. So just anything in which you are standing in front of a seated audience as stand-up. Yeah. Don't worry about stage and lighting and size. Just think of if you're standing and they're sitting, that is stand-up. Okay. So now, stand-up that errs towards close-up is parlor, meaning stuff that is, you do not need to have a sound, light. You mean it's a smaller object. It feels more like, like what you would imagine with sort of Steve Cohen is doing, things like that. That is a parlor size. So it's close. So stand-up that errs towards close-up is parlor. Stand-up that errs towards stage, where you need sound, light, amplification, bigger things to be able to play for a bigger crowd, that is platform. That's how I've always categorized it. So when you're looking through all that great Billy McComb stuff and all that great Alan Jackson stuff and Terry Seabrook and Wood Hayden and all the guys who've cut, Nick Lewin and Scott Alexander and Bill Abbott and go on and go on and go on, all those guys who've come up with that stuff, you should always think of it as, okay, does this work for both platform, bigger, as well as smaller? Because I should have focused on the smaller. I should focus on the parlor first, because I know then I can take that parlor stuff with modifications, make it more platform and build it up. And then that's how you can really sort of build your arsenal of the material you want to do it in these formal but yet less formal situations to then hopefully then build up to then have your formal stand-up show.
That is incredible advice. It really is. I hope that people really listen to what you said there. That was amazing, Jon. And this has been a great interview. I want to ask one last question. Sure. Before we wrap things up. And the final question I want to ask is, and it's a question I ask a lot of my guests, but it's especially pertinent to you, which is what's next? And what I mean by that is if you took any aspect of your career and you said to most magicians, you can achieve this by the end of your career, they would be over the moon. You can be, you can be a creator who's brought out L&L, project, one of the most popular card tricks of all time, lectured all over the world. Yeah, I'll take that. Oh, you can be a consultant that's consulted on this program. Yeah, I'll take that. You can perform on, be a regular performer at the Magic Castle and perform on TV on this show and this show and this show. You've done so much throughout your career. And and then you reinvent yourself, and now you're doing stand-up and you're making a success of that as well, and it's just so inspirational. I suppose my question is there anything left on your magical bucket list that you haven't achieved that you want to achieve? You've done it all successfully, you've bought the t-shirt, and then you've done it again. So but I also know you're a very driven, ambitious guy, and you're not anywhere near finished yet with your career. So what's next? What's the plans on the magical bucket list that you want to achieve that you haven't done yet?
Well, I think everyone's plans were kind of thrown for a loop, right? During everything. I think I had a trajectory that I was on, and there was a pause, and I had to regroup because I was like, I got a baby, I gotta fit, so I came up with all this, this virtual stuff, which again I'm still doing, and I actually really like, I'm not against it at all. I saw somebody say virtual magic will ruin magic. I'm like, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous. Doesn't make any sense. Anyway, it's just one aspect of things I can do, right? It's just yet another thing I can do. And so I don't, the best laid plans, who knows how it's going to go on, but to answer your question, I think for now, I'm very happy with what I've been able to achieve with Disney. We have a very nice deal with Disney, and I know what I'm going to be doing for all of next year. I know I got it all done. I got it all set up. As long as the world doesn't shut down again or cruises shut down again, I know what's going on. I know what I have and then other little places that I perform at and things I can do, I can throw those in the weeks that I'm not on the ship, and that all works. And so hopefully what's going to happen is that I'm going to be able to spend a little more time with my family, with my daughter, who is awesome. And just sort of build up that nest egg. And eventually I'm going to have to make a decision of whether I want to live here in California anymore and move somewhere else. And if I do move somewhere else, wherever that might be, there's a possibility that one of my lifelong dreams could happen, which is that I would own my own magic venue. That my wife is a business person, even that's what she does for a living. She's actually an entertainment writer, but she has an MBA in business, but she currently right now is a writer for different sort of entertainment related things. And so I have someone who has understanding of business to help me out. I'm obviously going to understand a creative, and I have a concept in my head. I could, generally lay out. It's a mixture between like a magic bar and then like a cabaret stage. So there are two areas where there'd be, cabaret, which would be anything. It could be stand-up, could be magic, could be burlesque, whatever. That could all happen in one place. And then in the other place would be like just a magic bar, a ticketed magic bar. And with a different type of theme to it. It wouldn't feel like the Magic Castle or the Chicago Magic Lounge or all the other places that have sort of popped up that are magic themed. It'd be more of an eclectic sort of oddities themed place. And it would hopefully be the kind of place where I could then retire and just do my show behind the bar, literally roll out of bed, walk down the street, do the show, and go back, take my kid to school every day and do that type of thing. That'd be great because eventually the travel is going to get to me, and I'm going to not want to deal with that anymore. So yeah, I would like to do that. That's something I think that would be in the cards, and it just sort of takes the time and the effort to put in it. And luckily, my years of being around the castle and and working on the projects that I have, hopefully I'd be able to translate that into the entertainment aspect of the business sense, and I'd have other people help me out with the money, the financial aspect of the business sense, and do that. Who knows? That might be the thing to do. And if I have a place like that, it would be a fun venue where I'd hopefully be able to get my friends to come out and perform and work that cabaret, work that magic bar, and hang out, and it would feel like a real unique place unto the world, and not just yet a little magic castle. Something actually different in the world of magic. So yeah, that's what I'd like to do eventually.
I could see you doing that 100%. And one thing from speaking to you that I've noticed that you seem to have an ability to do is realize when you want to change something before it happens and make that change. So, you went onto stage because you were getting to a point where you didn't want to carry on performing to groups anymore. So you made that change and you're proactive to do that. This is another example. You recognize that at some point you're not going to want to be doing the travel anymore. And so you have plans in place to actually kind of deal with that. And I've seen so many professional magicians that have been doing the same thing for 30, 40 years. And you can just tell that they don't really enjoy it anymore and they're going through the motions. And I think that's a really important lesson to learn from you, which is to change it up and always make sure that you're keeping it fresh and you're doing what you want to do. And that's something that I've realized from watching you.
Here's something you probably wouldn't expect that people learn from the Magic Castle, but this is one of the many things that I learned from the Magic Castle. And that was to save money, to put away things for retirement, to actually understand finances, and to try to plan for the future. Because unfortunately, there were a lot of magicians, no, that's not a good word to use, but they were magicians of note, of not note, who were professional magicians who spent their waning days at the castle pretty much penniless. Just hanging out because this was the only place that would accept them. It was essentially like, a retirement home. And, and they were able to like, at least get their meals comped or whatever, because they were who they were. And I saw that and I went, not gonna let that happen to me. I'm gonna make sure that I am prepared for the future, and that when it's time for me not to be able to do this anymore because of age or ailment or whatever happens, that I'm not going to be stuck. I will stop performing magic when I am ready, and not before. And if that happens, that there's tragedy strikes and I get caught, and I get caught up at a younger than I'm ready to go, I am prepared. I am prepared to then be able to be okay in the future. So, there was a big scare the last couple of years because a lot of those those future funds were sort of like had to dip into them to be able to like build my my cool setup, as you mentioned before, up so that I could actually do those virtual shows and I'd be able to get myself back on the same footing. And I think that's something that people don't think about. I don't think they're too much focused on the now and to really be planning for the future. And there is no magic pension, there is no magic societies, insurance, and all the things that we need, especially here in this country. I mean, you guys actually have a health insurance things. We don't have that. We're ridiculous. So like I think that kind of planning is the most in the weeds, boring part of magic entertainment could possibly ever be talked about. But it's something that like I actually focused on to make sure that like later in life that I was not going to be one of those guys sitting at the bar hoping someone would buy me a drink, because that's where that's all I had.
It's like having an exit strategy. Having something that, it's why I set up a business as an entertainment agency over here in the UK, because I knew at some point I wouldn't be able to go out and perform at the level that I could perform at the moment. Right. And I didn't want to be sitting around unable to perform and unable to have an income. I wanted to replace that before I, be proactive as opposed to reacting to a situation when it's too late. So I completely and totally agree with what you're saying there, 100%. Sure.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I think like, you can see very quickly during the pandemic, when I did step on the social media, you can see very quickly people who had planned for, that rainy day and people who didn't plan for that rainy day. It was very apparent across the board. And so I'm hoping that is a wake-up call for everybody. I'm hoping everybody can look at it, if you're going to do this for a living, in whatever capacity it is, as a creator, as a director, as a writer, as a performer, a combination of all of those things, that you are prepared for the next rainy day. Because I think, this might not be the last time. I'm not just talking about worldwide catastrophes, but like, even in your personal life, you never know what's going to happen. You step outside and get hit by that bus. You know what I mean? Like, you just need to be prepared for all those things.
Absolutely. And you know what? This has been an incredible interview. And that one piece of advice for anybody that's a professional magician is probably the most important takeaway from this whole interview. Plan for the future. Don't leave it too late. And you're right. I've seen so many amazing magicians over here in the UK that I've had so much respect for, and they're no longer in magic. They couldn't afford to, that COVID really killed them. They got themselves a full-time job, and now they're too scared to go back from that full-time job. They've sold all of their stuff and they've just left magic. And it's such a shame to see. It really is, because we've lost some really great performers over here. And
that's a shame.
It really is. So yeah, that piece of advice there, please everyone take that on board. It's so important. But yeah, like I say, this has been an absolutely incredible interview. When we arranged it, I was so excited because I've followed your career quite closely for a long time. I've been wanting to actually ask you to come on the channel, and I was like, oh, he's so busy. I know what he's doing. He's always all over the place. I'll drop him an email at some point, and it was just fortuitous that we were able to organize it when we did. Thank you for coming on the channel. Thank you for an amazing interview and spending time sharing your story and all the wonderful advice you've given. It's incredible, Jon. It really is.
Oh, well, no, thanks, man. This is fun. I know. And again, I love magic. I love magicians. I've learned very quickly that the way to make sure that I keep that love is to keep a healthy distance. So it's been good. It's been good for me. But I wish you all the best, and I cannot, and I'm not kidding. I cannot wait to get back to the UK, just to hang out with some of you guys again. Go to the circle, sit there and eat the stale chips and stale crisps. Say the right words, stale crisps, and just in session that would be a blast. So I look forward to those days again, and hopefully later this year, later the next year.
Absolutely. Well, next time you're over here, let me know, and I will buy you a pint, because
I look forward to it. I look forward to it.
100%.
That sounds great.
And awesome. And guys, leave a comment down below, and let Jon know what you thought of the interview. I'm sure he'll read them. I'm going to send him a link to this interview. I know he's not hugely active on social media, but I know if I send him the link, he'll check it out. So make sure that you leave a comment down below. And yeah, if you haven't already done so, buy everything that this man's put out, because it's just incredible, and it will make you a better performer.
There is a small plug. I can make a plug. Can I make a plug?
Oh, no, I wanted you. I normally say at this point, where can people go to support your stuff? But
okay.
You've just spent ages saying to me, you don't really lecture anymore. And, so I was like,
I did Magi Fest this year. They had me do Magi Fest this year, and it was great. I mean, man, was that great. It was a really great convention. So many reasons why. It was just nice to be back with a bunch of magicians again. And I really enjoyed it. But while I was there, Terry Ward, the former that I was talking about, who is my mentor, like my magic dad, I wrangled him to be sort of like my co-conspirator, and I re-released a bunch of tricks that I'd had in the LML sets, the updated versions of them, as well as 3 stand-up pieces that I'm very proud of. And all of that's be coming out as downloads with Vanishing Ink in the new year. I think sometime probably like February or something like that, because I haven't actually got the finished products yet. But the three blank Monty, which is a routine that I still do. It's a three card Monty with blanks. That's there. This is a really good oil and water routine. This really, if I do say so myself, this really good follow the leader routine is there. Those are the close-up card stuff. And then I have 3 stand-up pieces that are, one's a card stand-up piece, one's using Uno cards for Cards Across. It is the best family Cards Across. That's what I do at Disney Cruise Line. It's the easiest. You could do the Cards Across for a 5-year-old, and they're going to think it's the greatest thing that's ever happened. Because they understand it, because it's just red cards here, blue cards here. It makes perfect sense. And I do it with the dry erase boards. It's a very funny reason why it's all happening. I'm talking about cheating at Uno, and it works out really, really great. And a routine with a gaff that you have in your house, I guarantee you, I don't want to spoil it, but I guarantee you have this gaff in your house somewhere, and it's a stand-up trick with this gaff that you would not see coming. And again, it's actually in my Disney show, and I'm putting that out with Vanishing Ink, and it'll be downloads, and you'll be able to see that. And again, these are material that I've been working on for years, and was able to get my mentor to like be the co-host and sit there and like grill me on every last little bit of presentation, so that you guys are getting the most out of it when it comes to the teaching aspects of it as well. So
that's amazing. So would we go to Vanishing Ink to buy that, or would we?
Yeah, I think it'll be on Vanishing Ink. It'll be the downloads. It'll be like one of those download bundles. It probably will be, again, I'm assuming it's going to come out sometime in February. They're busy with their year-end stuff, and then they're going to do the session stuff with you guys over in the UK, and then it's going to go back.
They've just officially cancelled the session. Well, not cancelled it, but postponed it to later on in the year, because of what's happening over here with Omicron. It's especially in the central London, it's quite bad. So they've postponed it to about June, July. But yeah, so which isn't a problem. They're still going to go ahead with it, but they're just going to go ahead with it a few months later.
Yeah, I don't know when it's coming out. But be on the lookout for it, I guess is what I'm saying, next year.
So the best thing to do is to subscribe to Vanishing Ink if you haven't already done so, and you should do, because their podcasts, their blogs, everything they do, Andy and Josh, got great stuff. So subscribe to Vanishing Ink and look out for it. Yeah, I love the stuff that was on your original LNL DVD set anyway. So the fact that you're taking some of the best stuff and updating it is music to my ears. But then you add the stand-up material as well. That's killer. That's great.
Yeah, and if you're doing I just to go the other direction, with Penguin, I did a 4th Penguin lecture all on my virtual material, all on the online shows, and my thoughts about online shows and what online shows really are. And that's on Penguin right now. You can get that. And then I also I did a trick called Westview, which I named after WandaVision, because that's the kind of dork I am. And it is a killer matching trick that you can do over Zoom that is in every one of my online shows, and those are both through Penguin. So,
and
I do have
available,
I have stuff all over
available
places.
now? Or
No, those are available now. You could get those right now. Yeah.
Okay, so it's
Westview and my 4th Penguin lecture. I think it's Jon Armstrong 3 live. I don't know. You'll see. It's the latest one, whatever the latest one is. It's all on virtual material.
perfect. That's amazing, John. That's fantastic. So go buy all of John's stuff on Penguin, on Vanishing Ink, and anywhere else you can find it. It will make you a better magician, like I said. And John, one more time, thank you so much for coming on the channel.
Thank you, Craig. I appreciate it.
No problem. Guys, I'll see you again soon with another video. Thank you very much for watching. On behalf of Jon Armstrong, see you again soon.